same devices being used across age. So you don't have to worry about those issues. You still find the pattern of, moderate stability from age to age. Because I do behavioral genetics research, we're able to decompose that and see how much of the stability is due to genetic effects and how much is due to environmental effects and how much the change is due to genes and environment. And in the literature, you tend to find that stability is due to genes and change is due to the environment. But that doesn't tell the whole picture because there are some, well, we found with activity level, I'll speak for my own research since I know it well. We found with activity level that in some instances you get evidence of, you do get genetic stability, but you get evidence of genetic change. So just, I think we tend to think of genes as contributing solely to stability, but in fact that they can bring about developmental change. And we are seeing that with actometer measures of activity level, parent report measures of activity level, and observer measures of activity level.
So could you elaborate on just that last point? So what does that mean? That genetics are contributing to changes in people's relative ranking on?
Yeah, so what it means, what it means is that it's evidence of new genetic effects coming online. So it's from 2 to 3 with what we've been looking at. And there's evidence of new genetic effects coming online from 2 to 3. So from a practical perspective, if someone were to do molecular work, they would expect to find different, to some extent, different genes operating.
All right, other answers to this question? Yeah.
So when I think of what changes and what stays the same, the thing that I tend to think about is the idea of heterogeneous continuity. So what I mean by this is not the stability of the same behavior, but the stability of the same underlying factor causing very different behaviors. I'd say the one, kind of the first, an excellent example of this is looking at reactivity, negative reactivity to 4-month-olds, and looking at vigorous activity, and having that being related to very, very different behaviors, being related to a lack of activity and really inhibition in 4-year-olds or 7-year-olds. So it's one example. The way that we have tried to kind of identify what that common element is in our questionnaire work is to look at the stability at the factor level across time of these different traits. And these are factors that in some ways are very similar at the different ages, but are very different in other ways. So in infants, we might measure surgency, just to keep picking on surgency through just basic activity level, especially in highly intense positive situations. Whereas in older kids, we're going to look at things like sociability. We're going to look at choosing different environments in ways that infants really couldn't. But if we have something like activity level that's in the measures at all these different times, even though the other components switch around, I think we can kind of argue that, okay, well, the same thing that activity level in these contexts, we should identify with these other characteristics in infancy. And longitudinally is related to this other cluster of traits that includes activity level. And later on, it's associated with this different cluster of traits that also includes activity level. We have some purchase to continuity of the same underlying thing expressed through different ways. Interestingly, we also find, though, and Nina Comsey has found this, and Sarah Castle, and I had looked at her data today, we're also finding relations between different factors. So in our data, we find that surgency in infancy predicts high levels of effortful control in toddlerhood. Conversely, high levels of surgency in toddlerhood predicts low levels of effortful control later on. So I don't know if we can really consider this continuity, or I don't know what we want to call this, other than just the influence of one trait perhaps on another. So I don't know if this really fits in with continuity and change, but it's cool.
Well, one of the complications of deciding these things is, are we looking at a behavior that we can observe or that parents have observed? And some of temperament can't be observed. It's internal to the person. And the environment begins putting restraints on it or encouraging it. So it's very hard when we're talking about continuity and change, is subtracting that environmental influence from it and the socialization influence also.
Okay, questions? No, Bill. I want to give other people a chance. Other questions? I mean, I would add a question about, so implicit in what Sandee was just saying is the assumption that there's this underlying temperament, right, that you can't get at because it's being regulated or it's being, right? And is that a model that makes sense to say that there's some sort of underlying process that we cannot observe externally? I mean, you know, people will argue over the idea of is temperament itself changeable, right? Or is it just the behaviors or sort of the external manifestations of it that seem to vary over time? Any thoughts on that question?
I'm going to give you a different switch on that, is that I think the meaning of the same behavior can differ across time. So for example, in focusing on activity level, early on in infants is actually high activity in young infants is a good thing. Up to age 18 months or 18 months, it correlates positively with mental development. After 18 months, it correlates negatively. So it's same behavior having different implications. So
or it could be the same behavior reflecting different, fundamentally different processes.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think there is some interesting work that you did on, Jerry, on continuity of individual differences in physiology in the absence of behavioral continuity. So you do have something on the neurobiological level that remains across time, but on the surface of behavior you don't see it anymore. And I think that's quite interesting. And to me, it seems like really intimately linked to this concept of temperament. There is something profound biologically rooted that remains over time, even though you learn to control and to conceive it and so on. So the question is, to what extent are behavioral indicators really reliable indicators of temperament?
As you see, that's right, but then you see, that's what I was trying to say in my original comment. So that's an interesting observation, and then some people might say, well, it doesn't show a behavior of an important temperament, and that's fine. You see, that's why arguing that the meaning is important for this very reason. For someone that's perfectly, well, it doesn't show the behavior, and I can't observe it and quantify it, I'm going to say that's something else.
Yes.
I would just offer a perspective here to get a little controversy going. So let's say that a case, temperament is a neurochemical process. People might not agree with that, but let's say that that's the case. If we know from other research that such neurochemical processes can change as a function of experience, then it seems to me we would have to say that in fact temperament per se changes rather than just its expression.
Okay, I agree. Responses from other panelists?
So then would you say that the only way to take in purchase to that in our work would be to use physiological measures? And we're going to say that if the physiology changes,
I'm saying that let all the flowers bloom. In other words, for those, the majority of temperament researchers at this moment, I'm a temperament researcher, they're interested in the behaviors, and usually the behaviors that parents go along. And there's no reason to criticize that. Let's see what we learn from that. But that does not mean that another group can say, I'm sorry, that's not good enough for me. Let those flowers bloom because we're so early here. Let all the flowers bloom and not eliminate people. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not different. And that would be an integral thing in progress.
Right. Right, and and I think it's important to be open to the possibility of change or stability in various levels of phenomena, right? And then make sense of them afterward, right? Yeah.
You know, look, if you have the genes for leukemia, but you're not yet showing any symptoms, you have leukemia, even though you have no symptoms whatsoever. It still hasn't become an aggressive form, right? So this is Marcel's point. There are some people, let's say something we know because of all research in oxytocin, some people have really high oxytocin activity, but it doesn't always show in behavior. Well, that's interesting, and where might it show? Do they turn up differently when they're 5, 7, even though you might not see it in infancy?
Did you want to respond?
I wanted to respond to Sam's question, because I think he was saying, well, would I view this as we have to focus on neurochemical processes? I think that would be useful, but I don't think it eliminates every other kind of research. I mean, what if the neurochemical process changed and behavior didn't?
Right, and wouldn't that be interesting?
Right.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't assume, I don't want to be reductionist.
Right. Okay. All right, well, let's move, oh. Yes? Yes,
The jury can talk, I can talk.
Yeah. We need more participation from women, let me just. No, I'm serious about this. Happens with my students too. So go ahead.
We got to keep a clinical perspective here, at least part of the time. We clinicians know that we don't know how to change them, even when it's a big problem in relationship between parent and child, except possibly by misusing psychotropic drugs, which I explore. We mostly help parents to understand, tolerate, and live better with the traits that the kid has. But what can happen is when kids get to be 4, 5, 6, 7 years of age, they can learn to suppress the expression of the temperament, of the intensity, of the activity, of the shyness, of the low adaptability, and therefore get along better at times when it really matters. Now, if they do that, has the temperament changed? Good question.
It could, or it could not.
Some people I know who said they were terribly shy and they are no longer so. They feel that they've made a complete change. But there are others who say, yeah, I don't look shy, but I really still am. And so has it changed? So voluntary change with good parental help can make the temperament appear at least to have changed. And let's not overlook that.
I think there was I have a question from the back, so let me just go. Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt Samuel. He has a...
No.
Okay.
Please feel free.
My question is a little off topic. I love philosophizing about temperament, and I have read all of the temperament research. And my... That's what I've been doing for a long time. Okay, so I just want to put that out there when I say I work with early childhood educators. And when I have looked at all of the textbooks teaching people who work with young children about temperament, the only information that teachers get is children are different. And here are some ways they're different. And I love thinking about how we can understand goodness of fit or how we can think about trajectories for children. But I wanted to ask the panelists what they think about how is this useful? How can we translate understanding our categories into words that other people can understand and use who are working one-on-one with children and working on shaping behaviors, because I'm working with people who understand what was the words you said that were so lovely?
Heterotypic continuity.
Yes, heterotypic continuity, yes. I can get people to understand that idea, but when they're actually working with children, I want to say there are certain kinds of children who are like this, and research has shown that there are ways to help maximize parts of that or support parts. Or I wanted to get your thoughts, basically,
yeah, so
different
that's
thoughts,
actually
how to apply.
6, but I think we should jump ahead. We can do it now, and then we can come back. Yeah, because we did want to talk at the end about applying. Oh, poor Sam. Go ahead, Sam, and then we'll answer.
I guess I just don't understand if you're saying that temperament can't change. But if you know these clients who say, look, I used to be shy, now I'm no longer shy. I don't feel shy, I don't react physiologically like I'm shy. I guess it just, if it smells like a fish, if it looks like a fish,